This is Nusantara, soon to be Indonesia's new capital city. It will stand on 250,000 hectares of forested hills in East Kalimantan, almost 4 times the size of the current capital, Jakarta. The sinking land and choking pollution in Jakarta prompted President Jokowi to announce the new capital project in 2019. Construction is expected to stretch over 2 decades, but Jokowi has set an ambitious target for Nusantara's core area to be operational by August 2024, 2 months before the end of his presidential term. Doubts, however, linger around the $35 million project. Others have also questioned the social and environmental costs of building a megacity seemingly overnight. With roads laid down through the forest and the new state palace starting to take shape in a new city, one question lingers. Who is Nusantara really for? To understand the Nusantara project, we must step back to 2017, the 3rd year of Jokowi's first term. Jokowi has made a name for himself as a president that can get infrastructure projects done. And as a former Jakarta governor, he knows full well the problems of having the capital located in the sinking metropolis. It was back in 2017 when murmurs of a new capital began to swirl among the public. The plan finally came to fruition 2 years later, after Jokowi had fought a bitter re-election battle in 2019. In his State of the Nation address in the same year, Jokowi asked for the blessings of the Indonesian people and legislative members to move the capital to Kalimantan.
Dengan ini saya mohon izin untuk memindahkan ibu kota negara kita ke Pulau Kalimantan.
He announced the site in East Kalimantan as the home of the new capital days later, thanks to the province's low risk of natural disasters and the site's proximity to Balik and Samarinda. But the work for the new city was halted by the COVID-19 pandemic, when all resources were allocated for the emergency. Despite this, Jokowi announced in August 2021, just a month after Indonesia recorded its highest COVID death toll, that work on the new capital would be continued. When the pandemic finally wound down, Jokowi then proceeded in March 2022 with the groundbreaking of the new capital city. When the Jakarta-Post team visited Nusantara in October 2023, we saw firsthand what it takes to build a city from scratch. Most of the development over the past year has been focused on the core governmental area, or KIPP, which includes the Presidential Palace, the State and Presidential Secretariat, offices of coordinating ministries, and other key government buildings. The KIPP is a long strip representing the main axis of the new capital. The 4-storied Presidential Palace sits atop a hill that overlooks the whole core area. In front of the palace lies a ceremonial lawn, and below it a row of government offices. 2 arterial roads, called Jalan Sumbu Kebangsaan Barat and Timur, run parallel with the KIPP. Jokowi said in late September that work in KIPP had reached 38%. As of October 2023, workers had begun installing blades of steel at the State Palace that will eventually emulate the wings of the Garuda, the nation's symbol. Meanwhile, the offices of the coordinating ministries were still mostly skeletal. The new ministerial housing complex, on the other hand, had seen significant progress. The complex totaled 36 houses, set to be used by the country's 34 cabinet members and reportedly the Chief Justices of the Constitutional and Supreme Courts. Each house is valued at around 14 billion rupiah. It has 3 stories, is 580 square meters in size, and sits on a 1,300 square meter site. Outside of the KIPP, Nusantara has also seen a string of groundbreaking activities, ranging from a VVIP airport, malls and schools, to hospitals and hotels. Nusantara Capital Authority head Bambang Susantono described the new capital as a 10-minute city, with public transit hubs designed around walkability. He also said that the capital will be a green city with cutting-edge technology, including driverless buses and sky taxis.
Yang kita bangun ini adalah sebuah kota ya. Jadi kita tidak hanya membangun gedung-gedung, kita tidak hanya membangun infrastruktur, kita bangun sebuah kota yang lengkap. Kalau kita bangun sebuah kota berarti kota itu akan ada penduduknya, dan penduduk itu adalah yang utama buat sebuah kota ya. Bahkan quote dari misalnya Shakespeare, "What is a city but its people," gitu ya. Jadi yang kita inginkan adalah membuat kota yang lengkap dengan interaksi yang nantinya itu membuat kota ini tidak hanya kota yang layak huni tapi juga dicintai. Dalam bahasa kita adalah livable and also lovable city.
While Bambang has built Nusantara as a livable and lovable city, questions linger as to who is the new capital city livable for. The locals of Sakama Village, located around 13 kilometers from Nusantara's ground zero, live in fear that their ancestral homes might be taken away from them. The villagers, called the Balik people, have lived there since even before Indonesia declared its independence. Many people don't have land certificates for their homes, a predicament also faced by village elder Sibukdin.
Ya, ketakutannya hanya kita takut tersingkir saja, terutama itu ya, sebenarnya ya mungkin rumah-rumah kita yang tempat kami tinggal yang beberapa tahun secara turun-menurun di sini takut diambil alih oleh pemerintah gitu aja, karena kami tidak memiliki legalitas yang kuat secara hukum seperti sertifikat. Itu yang kekhawatiran kami. Kalau kami dikatakan menolak itu nanti kan jadi makar. Kami sebenarnya tidak semata-mata menolak itu tanpa punya alasan. Tapi dalam kata kutip kami belum tentu menolak. Siapa sih yang tidak ingin maju? Siapa sih yang tidak ingin modern ya?
Sibukdin said that the government had given its word that the people of Sepakulama will not be relocated. But he also said the people will only rest easy if this commitment is put in writing. Sibukdin hopes the government can provide solutions for Sepakulama villagers. Despite their pleas for legal certainty, Nusantara Capital Authority has given no guarantee that the government will issue land certificates to the Balik people.
Komitmen tertulis gitu, bahwa mereka tidak akan digusur. Is that something we will see later down the line?
Saya kira kita lebih baik melihat mereka sebagai bagian dari masyarakat Nusantara, ya, ketimbang kita nantinya akan melakukan hal-hal yang tidak produktif ya. Saya merasa bahwa dialog yang selama ini kita lakukan sudah cukup baik.
Instead, the authority considers providing villages with skill training and business opportunities as an alternative to including the Balik people in the future capital city. Regardless of how the Sepakulama villagers will fare, they have already felt the pressure of Nusantara's development just 1 year since the construction started, as their traditional ways of life are on the verge of extinction. One example is 54-year-old Bicik, who used to weave thatched roofs from palm leaves for a living. She would gather the leaves on the upstream of the Sepaku River, located just behind her house. The river, however, is now dammed up by the intake Sepaku Dam, one of the reservoirs set to provide clean water for Nusantara's new residents. Since construction of the dam started, Bicik said that she felt uneasy as she could feel her house trembling from the rumble of the construction drills. She also said that she often has arguments with workers of the dam, as she will occasionally find signage for projects on her land, and workers pass through her gardens using motorbikes, destroying her crops of fruits and vegetables.
Kemarin itu 27 pohon yang ditebang. Belum pohon-pohon buahnya, belum yang lain ini. Jadi makanya aku bilang, cukup sudah, jangan sampai yang ini kena. Cukup yang kemarin itu aja. Yang ini jangan sudah.
Dulu ini lahan ibu sampai mana, Bu?
Ya, mulai dari itu sana sampai itu.
Mulai dari tembok-tembok ini?
Iya.
Dulu ini pun masih lahan ibu?
Iya,
masih.
masih.
Ada tanaman dulu di sini?
Masih. Sekarang sudah enggak ada.
Dulu sungainya, kalau berarti sampai tembok-tembok itu masih
Ya.
tanaman, Bu ya?
Ya, masih tanaman, masih pohon-pohon pisang di sini.
sungainya mulai benar-benar habis itu.
Iya, sungai dari sana ke sana.
Terus
Ini kan
kalau
dialis ke sana.
mencari pohon daun nipah tadi ya.
Ya,
Sungai
lewat
gitu, Bu, ya?
ya, lewat sungai sana. Mengganggu. Betul sih rame. Dan hasilnya juga untuk kita apa? Nggak ada. Pohon tanaman kita habis, hasilnya ke depan nggak ada. Udah kita nyemula lagi. Memang sih kata mereka ini kan kalau habis mereka kerja kan sudah nggak ada, mereka tinggal. Tapi kita nanam nyemula dari awal-awal. Tapi kapan kita bisa nunggu sudah habis? Nggak ada. Jadi aku bilang nggak ada, sudah ada. Jadi habis jadi luas semua aku bilang. Mulai dari seujung sana sampai nggak ada.
Elsewhere in the village, the head of the local farmers community, Mustafa, is also facing the pressure of Nusantara's development. He said the native Balik people were traditionally farmers and had long relied on the river for irrigation and transportation. They would plant padi gunung or mountain rice in the hilly terrain. The harvest can feed families for almost 1 year. But with the river dammed up, farmers in the village are struggling to water their crops. Mustafa said some farmers lost their land as the authorities bought it for the intake Sepaku Dam.
Di kelurahan Sepaku ini kita mau buka ladang sudah tidak bisa, sudah di sket sama IKN sudah. Nah, jadi kita ya pasrah sudah.
Udah pasrah Pak ya.
Iya, yang penting saya bilang lahan yang ada itu jangan diganggu gugat dulu untuk bertahan hidup di situ untuk petani saya bilang. Saya pernah bilang di kantor itu jangan diganggu karena itu haknya orang masyarakat petani saya bilang.
Mustafa is among the lucky ones, as he has a small piece of land away from the intake Sepaku Dam construction site. He usually harvests fruits and vegetables during the rainy season, but he's not sure if that's the case now, as the dam upstream has reduced the water drastically. Mustafa said the Balik people had relied on the river to sell their crops to Balik Papan.
Sekarang kita masyarakat itu terbalik, malah kita yang beli dari keluar. Kalau tahun kemarin kita yang menjual, sekarang semua kayak cabai saya beli semua.
Mustafa feels farmers are a dying breed in Sepaku Lama. He fears Nusantara's development will leave nothing for his children and grandchildren.
Tapi kalau saya punya feeling, kalau untuk petani sudah jauh. Apa saya bilang jauh? Karena lahan itu banyak dikuasai mereka itu. Dibayar tidak setimpal harganya gitu. Namanya uang kan bisa habis. Tapi kalau tanah kan untuk bangun anak cucu turun-temurun gitu.
Like Mustafa, Bece also fears the worst for her children and grandchildren, as she thinks that the construction of the intake Sepaku Dam will eventually creep up all the way to her house.
Takutnya habis nanti, kita ndak punya lahan, kita ndak punya tempat tinggal. Nah itu yang aku takut betul.
Untuk anak cucu tuh.
Ya, untuk anak cucu ndak ada. Kita ini kan punya lahan, punya tempat tinggal itu nomor satunya untuk anak cucu. Kalau kita sudah ndak ada. Jadi untuk anak cucu ini di mana tempat mereka, kasihan.
While their traditional ways of life are under threat, the people of Sepaku Lama are now at a crossroads. Sibukdin said there has been a proposal to turn Sepaku Lama into a cultural village. This would pivot the local economy away from agriculture into tourism. He hopes that the nearby Mount Parung would be one of the village's main attractions. As we were making our way there, Sibukdin had a call from the Tourism and Creative Economy Ministry, inquiring whether or not he would be able to have an audience with Minister Sandiaga Uno.
Nanti Bapak akan kami sambungkan dengan Zoom dengan Pak Menteri ya Pak.
Oke. Sekarang ini, sore ini.
Oke, siap sore ini.
The road to the mountain is wide enough to fit 2 trucks, but it is barely paved and littered with potholes, making what could have been a 15-minute car ride into more than 30 minutes. Visitors also have to pass through hills of eucalyptus and acacia trees to get to the Mount Parung base camp. the last access point cars can pass through. Mount Parung is located around 10 kilometers away from the Sakama Village. Its peak is the highest within the Nusantara area and can be seen all the way from the new capital's construction site. One of the main attractions of Mount Parung is an empty quarry that had become a tranquil pond. According to Sibukdin, the old quarry was a popular spot for swimming among local youths. The peak of the mountain itself is another hour's hike away from the quarry. Just as we descended Mount Parung, the time came for Sibukdin to hold an audience with Minister Sandiaga. To Sandiaga, he conveyed his hopes that tourism could be a new source of income for locals.
Itu sangat besar sekali karena tidak ada lain. Kita juga mau mengambil andil proyek-proyek atau kegiatan ibu kota negara itu di Sepaku. Ya, kalau itu pun tidak terlaksana, bukan salah kami. Kami sudah memohon dan berharap kepada mulai dari Pak Deputi dan Pak Muksin, Pak Menteri sudah tersampaikan apa yang kami inginkan. Ya, mudah-mudahan ini bisa cepat terwujud.
Back in the busy streets of Sepaku, locals and newcomers have taken the economic opportunities brought forth by the development of Nusantara. One such enterprising businessman is Arif, a Balikpapan native who in October 2023 opened a restaurant right on the main road leading up to the new capital. His previous restaurants in Java were unsuccessful, leading him to look for greener pastures earlier this year.
Ada obrolan dengan orang tua, kenapa kamu nggak bikin di Kalimantan atau di Balikpapan atau di yang terdekat, kita kan ada di IKN, apalagi IKN dalam waktu dekat akan rame gitu kan, prospeknya kemungkinan bagus.
Since he opened the restaurant, Arif says that the response has been great from the local community.
Hari pertama masih agak di bawah, hari kedua, ketiga, dan saat ini alhamdulillah omset kami lumayan. Menurut saya malah lebih banyak di sini daripada yang di Jawa untuk saat ini, seperti itu.
Down the road from Arif's restaurant is Maharaja Homestay, a 5-room inn operated by local Kuswatun Hasanah. Kuswatun is of Javanese descent, but has spent all her life in Sepaku. Her parents were part of the massive transmigration movement into Sepaku in the 1970s and 80s.
Saya itu berpikirnya itu mulai Januari sebenarnya. Waktu itu kan lagi rame itu orang datang ke sini cari penginapan, terus penginapan teman-teman itu pada kurang gitu kan. Karena kayaknya peluang besar itu penginapan gitu, karena orang kalau sudah penuh itu bingung cari di mana.
Construction began in January 2023. It took a total of 250 million rupiah before the homestay finally opened in April of the same year. Her inn has almost always been fully booked, particularly if the president's entourage is coming to town. As a local of Sepaku, Kuswatun says that Nusantara's development means more than just a business opportunity.
Ya harapannya sih kalau seandainya memang IKN itu ada, ya pastikan anak-anak di sini itu kan nanti jadi anak Jakarta tuh. Pastikan biasanya kita yang dulu sekolahnya harus ke Balikpapan. Dulu kan di sini kan desa banget, jadi kita itu kayaknya ilmunya nggak terlalu banyak gitu mas. Jadi kalau mau kuliah kemana-mana kan tuh mahal. Nanti kalau sana sudah jadi IKN kan anak-anak itu kuliah di sini lebih dekat. Pasti kan kalau IKN juga pendidikannya nggak kayak pendidikan yang dulu, pasti yang lebih bagus, gurunya juga pasti nanti dididik juga lebih bagus.
In East Kalimantan, a new civilization is rising from what had been forested hills. Questions have been asked. Who is Nusantara really for? For some, it's a towering symbol, Indonesia's development, or a legacy for an outgoing leader, perhaps. For some, Nusantara represents new opportunities yet to be explored. But for others, Nusantara is also a nuisance, a reminder that development always comes with sacrifices and that you have to adapt to survive. One thing for sure is that 1,000 kilometers away from the future city, Jakarta, the old capital, the city that never sleeps, can finally rest easier by August 2024. As Nusantara, where the sky is not even the limit, where work also never sleeps, is set to take its place.